Welcome back to Vuln Vibes. Today, we are going to be talking about a recent Grafana vulnerability. And this is one that should be, well, right at the top of your risk register this week.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just some minor flaw or, a routine bug fix.
No, not at all. We are looking at a maximum severity, basically a zero-day level vulnerability.
That's exactly right. We're diving into CVE 2025-41115. It's a flaw in Grafana enterprise instances, and it hits a CVSS score of 10.0.
A perfect 10.
A perfect 10. And for the security pros listening, that number alone should tell you everything you need to know about taking immediate action.
When you hear 10.0, you know the impact is, well, it's catastrophic, it's unauthenticated, easily exploitable. In this specific case, the threat is privilege escalation and user impersonation.
Mm-hmm.
For any organization running Grafana at scale, this is the nightmare scenario for your identity and access management.
It's the complete corruption of the identity plane.
Exactly.
Think about it. If your whole enterprise relies on these sophisticated, automated provisioning workflows to manage users, a failure right here means an attacker can just bypass the authorization boundary
And become admin.
and assume the role of the highest privileged account. So our mission today is to get past the headlines. We need to unpack the precise configuration you need for an exploit, dissect the code failure, and then give a clear path for remediation.
Okay, let's get into it. The core issue. The vulnerability is formally called incorrect privilege assignment.
Right.
And it lives squarely within the System for Cross-Domain Identity Management feature, SCIM.
And this is a relatively new feature, right? It was only introduced back in April for enterprise and cloud.
It is.
And that context is so important because SCIM is where your identity provider, your IDP, basically shakes hands with Grafana.
It's the automation layer.
It's the automation layer. It's the protocol that handles the entire user lifecycle, creating users, updating them, managing teams. For a big enterprise using, say, Azure AD or Okta, this isn't just a feature, it's essential infrastructure.
So if the integrity of that SCIM layer is broken,
You've broken the trust boundary. The critical link between your identity authority and the application is gone.
Okay, before we go any deeper, let's clarify something really important for everyone listening. A huge number of people use Grafana OSS, the open source version.
Mm-hmm.
Are they affected? Can they just, disregard this CVE?
They absolutely can, yeah. This vulnerability, CVE 2025-41115, is specifically scoped to Grafana Enterprise and Grafana Cloud.
Only them.
Only them. If you are running pure OSS, the feature that has this flaw just isn't there, so you're not impacted. This is purely an enterprise concern.
Which makes sense, given it's an enterprise-grade feature.
Right. Now, what's fascinating, and it really speaks to the severity here, is the coordination Grafana Labs did before the public disclosure.
You mean with the cloud providers?
Exactly. They worked closely with Amazon-managed Grafana, Azure-managed Grafana.
The big players?
The big players. They provided advanced patches under an embargo. The idea was to make sure these major managed offerings were secure before the public announcement ever went live.
And that kind of coordination, that tells you they thought the potential for exploitation was
Extremely high. They knew that as soon as this went public, people would try to exploit it. So they basically closed the zero-day window for a huge part of the community that relies on those providers. It was really commendable incident handling.
Okay, so let's shift gears and get into the deep technical vector. This is for the security architects in our audience. This isn't a bug that affects every single enterprise instance out of the box. It's highly conditional.
Very conditional. And that's key for prioritizing your defense.
So what are the specific non-default configs that have to be in place for an instance to even be vulnerable?
You need two distinct settings to be explicitly turned on, and they're both off by default.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, the enable SIM feature flag. That has to be set to true. This just, turns on the SIM functionality in general.
And the second gate?
The second is an option called user sensibled. This one lives inside the awk.sim block in your config file.
And that also has to be true.
That also has to be set to true. You need both. Both gates have to be open at the same time. If your team deployed Grafana Enterprise, but you haven't actually integrated SCIM provisioning yet, you're safe from this specific CVE.
That gives people a really fast mitigation strategy right there. If you can't patch this second, check those two flags.
Absolutely.
But let's assume those gates are open, which they probably are in most large orgs. How does the actual compromise work? We're talking about a malicious SCIM client, right?
That's the entry point. The compromise starts with a malicious or, maybe more likely, a compromised SCIM client.
Like a service principal.
A service principal, an admin account tied to the IDP, something like that. It initiates the provisioning process for a new user, and the attack exploits a really fundamental data mapping flaw in Grafana's backend.
Okay, walk us through the mechanics of that mapping flaw. This is the integer confusion part, right?
It is. The core failure is how Grafana tries to reconcile identity data. So the SCM protocol uses a field called externalid.
Okay.
It's typically used by the IDP to uniquely identify a user. It's usually just handled as a string.
But Grafana does something different.
It does. Grafana takes this externalid and tries to map it directly to its own internal user.uid field.
And what's the data type difference there?
That's the whole problem. The externalid is a string, but Grafana's internal user.uid is a number. An integer. It's used to uniquely ID accounts in the database. The bug is that the backend logic just tries to cast the string from the externalid into an integer for the internal UID.
So the attacker's just leveraging that type juggling vulnerability.
Precisely. If the attacker provisions a user and supplies an externalid that is just a simple numeric string like, for instance, the string literal1,
Grafana just says, okay, that's the number 1.
It interprets that input as a valid, existing internal numeric user ID. It's a classic type confusion bug just executed across an identity provisioning layer.
And why is the number 1 so bad in a standard Grafana setup?
Because in almost every default installation, the very first highest privilege account, the main admin user, is assigned the first ID in the database.
So it gets user ID 1.
It gets user.uid of 1.
So by provisioning a new user but giving it the ID 1, the attacker basically forces Grafana to overwrite or assume the session of that existing admin account.
It's essentially an identity collision that leads to a session hijack. The new user object they create successfully impersonates the administrator account with UID1.
And they get full administrative control.
Control over the entire Grafana deployment. The attacker doesn't need credentials, they just need to manipulate that SCM request. It makes the attack chain dangerously simple.
That is a terrifyingly elegant failure. Okay, let's move to the operational side of things. What's the vulnerable range and what's the remediation?
Right. We are looking at Grafana Enterprise versions 12.0.0 all the way up to and including 12.2.1.
Okay.
If you're running any version in that window and you have those two SCM flags active, you have to treat this as an active incident.
What are the immediate patching options?
The mandate is upgrade immediately. Grafana Labs has released patched versions, so you need to target one of these. Either the latest major release, which is Enterprise 12.3, or a backported release.
Like 12.2.1.
Yes, or 12.1.3 or 12.0.6. And if patching right now isn't an option, the fastest mitigation is to just disable those two SCM feature flags we talked about. That closes the vector immediately.
And just to reiterate, Grafana Cloud users are already safe.
Already patched. They were protected during that embargo period.
Let's pivot to the incident timeline, because this is fascinating for anyone in IR. Grafana Labs was really transparent with the UTC timings.
Yeah, the timeline shows some amazing internal diligence. The discovery happened internally. It wasn't a bug bounty, it wasn't public, it was their own audit and testing.
On November 4th, 2025.
At 19.114 UTC, specifically. An internal team caught this before it ever saw the light of day.
And the response was fast. The internal incident was declared, and the CVE was reserved that same day at 1642 UTC.
And this next part, this shows how seriously they took it. Within 15 minutes of declaring the incident, the cloud team had already confirmed there was no exploitation.
And deployed a patch.
And deployed the patch to their cloud infrastructure. At 16.45 UTC, that is an incredibly tight and efficient IR loop. Discovery to cloud containment in just a few hours.
And then we see the structured disclosure kick in. The private advisory went out the next day, November 5th, but the public announcement, the blog post, the public patches, that didn't happen until November 19th.
Right, a nearly 2-week gap.
Which is
a textbook example of responsible disclosure coordination. They used those 2 weeks for vendor coordination, making sure Amazon, Azure, all the major partners had time to apply the fixes, test them, and secure their own offerings.
So they minimized the risk of a mass zero-day event.
Exactly. It shows a really mature understanding of the risk profile of a CVSS 10.0 vulnerability.
What really stands out to me is that their internal diligence basically prevented a massive global identity security crisis.
That's the takeaway, I think. This flaw was in the identity provisioning lifecycle, a component that, by definition has high privileges. The potential for a widespread automated compromise was huge.
And the attackers never got the chance.
Never got the chance to operationalize this simple but catastrophic bug.
Okay, let's quickly summarize the key takeaways that you need to be actioning. We're dealing with CVE 2025-41115, a CVSS 10.0 critical flaw.
It's strictly enterprise only, affecting versions 12.0.x up to 12.2.1, and critically, it's conditional.
Right, you need both the enable scene feature flag and the user sendable config option set to true.
If that's you, you must patch immediately to 12.3 or one of the backported versions.
And for anyone listening who might be doing their own research or audits, just a quick reminder on protocol.
Yeah, if you find a vulnerability, please use the established reporting process. Report it through the official vendor channels. This timeline proves the massive benefit of responsible disclosure.
Don't just drop it on social media.
Please don't. Avoid public disclosure until the vendor has announced the fix.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over. We saw this critical flaw, a CVSS 10.0 identity bypass caught by an internal audit before any public exploitation. So think about that. What investment ratio should your organization apply to proactive, deep internal security reviews versus, say, reactive external bug bounty programs?
Especially for identity and authorization code.
Right. Think about the massive exposure window that was just eliminated by that internal diligence. It prevented a global incident. So where's the highest ROI for your security spend?
That really speaks to the maturity of a security program, doesn't it? Relying on external researchers is one thing, but having the internal capability to find these fundamental flaws in your most critical features, that's a truly effective defense posture.
Food for thought. That's it for this deep dive into the Grafana SCIM vulnerability. We'll catch you next time on Vuln Vibes.